My, my name is Shania Martinez.
And my name is Adeline Sabido, and this is our project on suicide awareness. So before we begin this presentation, we would like to issue a trigger warning. We created this project to provide support to individuals who struggle with mental illness, suicidal ideation, and depression. And while we are comfortable discussing such a difficult subject, we do recognize that subjects discussed during this presentation may be triggering. However, that is not our intention. The purpose of this presentation is simply to bring awareness and provide education to anyone who may be affected by suicide.
The reason I chose this project is because both of us have struggled with mental illness in the past. For myself, it started after my dad passed away. I have been directly and indirectly affected by suicide, whether it be personal or because of a loved one.
So just as Shania mentioned, I have struggled with mental illness in the past, and having those feelings and not knowing what to do at such a young age was detrimental to my mental health and also just to my overall well-being. And I wish I had known who to turn to, what to do, what to look for in my own self to recognize that I did have a problem and that I should have looked for help. So our efforts in creating this project is to hopefully save someone else in a similar situation and give them those resources that they need to find help and also get help for others who may be needing it.
This presentation will include our project objective, the importance of the project, some statistics on suicide, a definition and facts about depression, risk factors associated with suicide, warning signs typically seen, what to say, what to do, the benefits of the suicide awareness event, and resources available for general Adams State students and staff, LGBTQ+, and veterans populations.
So as I mentioned earlier, the objective of this presentation and project is to provide information about warning signs, risk factors, and how to help someone during a crisis.
Why is the project important? While everyone can be affected by suicide, some groups that are typically seen at a higher risk for suicide include LGBTQ+, veterans, first-year students, and first-generation students. This may be related to mental health stigma. Mental health stigma causes people to avoid or delay seeking help because they don't want to be treated differently or categorized. An example includes automatically assuming someone is crazy because they see a therapist or a counselor. It can be public or self-inflicted. Self-inflicted is when you're putting those negative thoughts about yourself into the world. So some facts and figures about suicide would be suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. On average, 132 Americans die by suicide each day. That's about 48,344 Americans. It's the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34, and the fourth leading cause of death for ages 35 to 54. So as you can see, this is seen throughout the lifespan, and it doesn't just affect a specific age range. Firearms accounted for slightly more than half of all suicide deaths, and 10.3% of Americans have thought about suicide, and 54% of Americans have been affected by suicide. So whether that be yourself or a loved one, it could be either or.
So we do recognize that anyone can be suicidal and or have thoughts of self-harm. However, for the purpose of this project, we are focusing on individuals who have been diagnosed with or experiencing signs and symptoms of depression. Depression is defined as a common mood disorder that affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. We all have days where we feel sad or depressed at times because of whatever may be going on in our lives. But when this sadness becomes so intense that it lasts for weeks or months and it's starting to get in the way of your daily activities, that's when it becomes diagnosable as depression and it becomes a problem. Warning signs associated with depression will be discussed in further detail later on in this presentation. So some facts about depression is it affects 18 million adults in any given year in the United States. So that is 1 in 10 adults. And of this population, women are twice as likely to experience depression compared to men. That's just for a multitude of reasons, biological, psychological, environmental, just kind of depends. And depression is the leading cause of disability for ages 15 through 44. So just as mentioned, Shania mentioned in the previous slides, it affects a whole gamut of age ranges. It does not discriminate on who it affects. It can be anybody, as shown by the following statistic of 300 million people worldwide are affected by depression. Currently, depression is the primary cause of suicide, and suicide occurs approximately every 12 minutes. So that is about 41,000 people each year. And as a comparison, homicides claim less than 16,000 lives each year.
So some risk factors associated with suicide include gender. Depression is more common in women compared to men. However, men are more likely to complete a suicide because they use more fatal methods. Also, familial history can be a risk factor, trauma and stress, and a pessimistic personality. So just having a negative outlook on life.
So some more risk factors are physical conditions. So for those individuals who are chronically sick or always in the hospital or bedbound or whatever the situation is, they tend to have more rates of depression and suicidal ideation. Others are environmental factors. So just like Shania mentioned about family history, if they've had previous exposure to violence or suicide, if they are experiencing neglect, abuse, or poverty, these can also lead to depression. And as we said earlier, depression is not the only thing that leads to suicide. Other disorders are anxiety disorders, eating disorders, schizophrenia, and substance abuse.
Warning signs that are seen are anxiousness, agitation, or aggression, erratic behavior, so being happy 1 minute and then at a flip of the switch, being aggressive the next, mood swings, giving away personal belongings, increasing alcohol and substance abuse more than normal, researching suicide methods, and rumination, so deep thoughts about life.
Other warning signs are self-injury or self-harm, which is typically what we associate with depression and or suicidal attempts, are the wounds that we see on individuals. Also changes in sleep patterns, hopelessness, feelings of being trapped, talking about pain, whether physical or psychological, and expressing thoughts about death. So we are in nursing school, and we are always taught how to best communicate with our patients. Something that we have been taught in school is that expressing thoughts about death is not necessarily explicitly saying we want to kill ourselves or we want to die, whatever that may sound as. Sometimes they use covert statements, and so that is defined as a statement that sounds like it might be statements of hope, but that's not exactly what it is. So they may say, I won't have to deal with this problem any longer, I'll be happy soon enough, or I won't be a problem anymore. Those are not hopeful statements or happy statements. That is them stating that they have found a solution, and in this situation, that solution may be ending their life. The last warning sign is isolation from others. That may be because their depression is worsening. They might be attempting to save those that they love from further heartache by pushing them away, whatever that situation may be.
So what to say? When communicating with someone who is experiencing a crisis, it's important to be direct, be open, and be honest. Provide encouragement and try to understand their feelings. Don't just brush them off. Don't act shocked, but express concern. Get professional help and act as soon as possible.
As far as what to do, trust your instincts. If you think there is somebody in your life who plans on harming themselves, Don't keep it a secret. Go tell somebody, go tell mutual friends of yours, go tell a mental health professional, somebody who can help them. And do not leave them alone. If they are serious about these plans, they will find a way to make it happen. And so they should not be left alone. So then there's always supervision with them. And during this time when they're talking to you about it, or maybe when you are starting to notice the warning signs, encourage them to seek help, not necessarily always from you, but from other people, because this is not a burden that you or they should bear alone. This requires a team effort. And if you are in the position to do so, remove lethal means. So by that, I mean remove firearms, just like what we mentioned earlier. That is the number one use of methods to complete a suicide. Remove razors or medications or knives. And this is just a method of keeping them safer and also keeping those around them safe as well.
So the benefits of this project would include providing resources to several demographics throughout our campus and other campuses. Like Adeline was saying previously, we're not just wanting to impact ours. We want this to go bigger and possibly even reach high schools and middle schools. The resources that we have at the end of this presentation include texting, emailing, calling, or chat messaging systems. At this event, we want to provide positive coping mechanisms for individuals and also self-care activities.
So the event details for the Suicide Awareness Week will be at the Japanese Garden, and it will be available to Adams State students and staff. And depending what campus restrictions will be in September, maybe individuals from the community, from the high schools, can also join us. It will be held on September 10th, which is Suicide Awareness Day. That entire week from September 5th to September 11th is Suicide Awareness Week. And at this event, as Shania mentioned, we will be handing out information cards, self-care activities, just light-hearted ways to deal with this, because we don't want this to be a heavy event, even though this is a very serious topic. And all of this is pending Adams State approval. However, unfortunately, we won't be there because we will be graduating in May, yay. And unfortunately, last year we couldn't get it done because of COVID restrictions. So we have handed down this project to the Adams State Student Nurses Association. So they will be the ones responsible for holding this event this coming September.
Some resources that are available to us at a Colorado level and national level. Sorry, that kind of sounded a little funky, but I meant a local level and a national level. Would be the San Luis Valley Behavioral Health Group. They have counselors and also a hotline available in order to seek resources, and they are local in the Valley. Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, they're located out of Colorado Springs, and they also have an email and a phone number to call. Colorado Crisis Services, which is a hotline and a texting line. Pueblo Suicide Prevention Center, which is another helpline, but also they have a hotline that is specifically for teens. The national resources include the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and they have a hotline, texting options, and also something that I found interesting is they have a Spanish speaking option. For the Valley, I think this is really important because we have a lot of people who do not speak English as their first language and cannot get their point across in English. So I think it's really important that they have the option to speak in their native tongue. Also, the National Alliance of Mental Health, which is also known as NAMI, they have a hotline and a texting resource.
So as of July 16th, 2022, there will be a new hotline, which will be 988, available to individuals in the United States. So it's a lot like 911. It's very easy to remember, and it's very easy to dial rather than a 10-digit number. It is sponsored by the government, so it will be across the United States. It'll be universal. And the reason why this is so important is because it sends a powerful message to reduce and eventually eliminate mental health stigma it's so hard to remember a 10-digit number. And if you are truly in a crisis, you're not going to try to look up that number, right? But whereas if you have that in the back of your head of, oh, 988, if I'm going through something, that is something that you can easily dial. Just like if you feel like you're in danger, you can easily call 911. So we just think that is a really wonderful step in the right direction.
Some resources that are available for veterans include the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you press 1, you will be automatically put to a veterans counselor. They have more knowledge into dealing with like PTSD or anything of that sort. And then also there's a texting line and another line that is vet-to-vet assistance. So this gives you the chance to talk to someone who has possibly been in your shoes before and actually knows how to talk to a veteran experiencing these issues.
So the last set of resources we have are for LGBTQ+. Just as Shania was mentioning, there are text, email, chat, and phone call services. And the reason why these services are so important, the LGBTQ and the veterans, is it's hard to talk to somebody if they don't understand what you're going through, if they're not counseled specifically for the issues that you may be facing. Like I myself, I'm bisexual, and it's hard to talk about issues that bisexuals face with people who don't understand what life as a bisexual is like. You know, it makes it hard to want to talk to them or make it seem like they even understand what I'm saying to them. So having these hotlines makes it so that it's more relatable for you and so that it's more helpful in the long run for whatever it is that you may be needing. And so lastly, we would just like to encourage everybody to check in on one another. This last year has been so difficult because of COVID. We had to isolate ourselves. It wasn't even a choice anymore. And even though we are getting back into times that feel somewhat normal, the effects of COVID are going to last us for quite a few years to come. We know that, we recognize that. And if you feel like you are experiencing any of these warning signs or those around you, whether those are loved ones, coworkers, or even just a student in your classroom, have them seek help and seek help for yourself as well. That is the only way to get anywhere with mental illness, is to have the team effort behind it. As the African proverb says, if you want to run fast, run alone, but if you want to run far, run together.
Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope to see you, well, not us see you, or hopefully us see you, but we hope that you guys can make our event in September.